Morning, everyone. Welcome to Wake and Take. It's your boy Jason. We've got some football to talk about today. It's Thursday, so we're just going to kind of go through the week. We're going to go through practice reports. We're going to talk some of the bigger news stories of the week. We're going to give my top starts and sits by position, and then we're going to go game by game, picking the winners and talking some other potential storylines in that. So go ahead and take out your coffee, sit back, relax, and enjoy the show. All right. So welcome in, everyone. Happy to see you all. Mark, Dustin, Donald, Hudson, Sarcasm, Ryan, to the house. Thank you all for tuning in. And if you're listening on the podcast, thank you for listening there as well. Again, guys, the podcast can be found via the link in the description if you feel like listening instead of watching. Oh, no, Harry Snowman's Frenchie's having surgery. Wishing your dog the best. Sorry to hear that. Yeah, sorry to hear that. Hope you have a good day. Hope everything is okay with your dog. Good morning to you. Or maybe not a good morning. But hey, we're hanging in there. We're going to start things off with news, I guess. And right before we went live, there was a big update, and that is around Chuba Hubbard. Chuba Hubbard has signed a 4-year extension with the Carolina Panthers. This is something we have been talking about for weeks. There was no reason for him to end up anywhere else. And that's why we've been talking about trying to sell Jonathan Brooks if you had him. There was just no reason. Jonathan Brooks was just such a highly valued asset in fantasy right now that there was no point to hold on to him. You should have been exploring selling. Chuba Hubbard was playing too well. And now we're talking about a committee. Now you don't really want Chuba Hubbard or Jonathan Brooks forever, right? Like there's just no point. I mean, they might be a good duo together, but for the most part, this Panthers offense is still going to, it's going to need at least another season to end up being a good NFL offense. So many things are just not really working in their direction right now. But at least they have the backfield. Chuba Hubbard and Jonathan Brooks are both, at least we're assuming with Jonathan Brooks, a good running back. And Chuba Hubbard has been very good as well. So it should be a nice little backfield. But for the most part, they're probably going to cannibalize each other in terms of fantasy points. So it's a little disappointing for Jonathan Brooks managers. In fact, massively disappointing for Jonathan Brooks managers. Good news for Chuba Hubbard, right? Like it is good news for Chuba Hubbard, being able to stay in Carolina. That should give some sort of a floor for his fantasy value. Basically there was no bottom for his value right now because he was on Carolina. His contract was set to expire. And no one was really expecting him to go onto the free agent market and do anything crazy. That's why we expected him to just return to Carolina. But it was actually a pretty decent deal he got as well. So, again, hopefully you sold Jonathan Brooks. That's a move we've been recommending for a while now here. If you didn't, I mean, you're stuck holding on to him. And I'm not even really sure what you'd be looking to get. I would just say hold. But for Chuba, maybe try selling as a result of this news. He might go up in value. And if not, you've got a guy who's at least going to get you 8 points a week or something like that. Nothing too crazy, but at least be a decent flex play in a pinch. But for the most part, crowded backfield now in Carolina, kind of concerning there. Now, we do have a little bit of a super chat here. So thanks for the question, James. What do you think? Which side on this trade? Derrick Henry and DeAndre Hopkins or Devon Achane, Jaden Reed, Sam Laporta? Give me the Achane, Reed, Laporta side. And it's honestly not really that close, especially if it's dynasty. But even if it's redraft, I still think that Jaden Reed is better than Hopkins. Achane and Derrick Henry, they're about neck and neck at this point, especially with Tua back. I mean, Achane is just special right now. So now you're basically talking about a free Sam Laporta. Sign me up. So cool. That's really the only news story. I mean, for the most part, the rest of the news is going to revolve around injuries. So why don't we just go ahead and jump right on into it? We've got a lot of injury updates to discuss today, so buckle on up. These are going to be practice updates in general, right? These are just literally updates for practice. All of them are going to come down to Wednesday, so if there's a Monday night team, we're not really going to know too much yet, but we like to go ahead and look at it now because it gives you a little bit of an early look at who may or may not be playing this week. I know that Wednesday, a lot of times players don't practice for veteran reasons, but a lot of times too, it does still start trending into the direction of if they will be playing or not. So we're going to talk about a lot of players in this next segment. Just kind of keep your ears open. We'll discuss if you really need to keep monitoring it or not. And just kind of my thoughts and that kind of stuff. But anyway, thank you for the super sticker, Harry Snowman. No question or anything like that. Just genuinely Hitting the support. Thank you for that, guys. Lots of support this morning. Thank you. Need it, rough couple days going on in the world. But anyway, injury updates. We'll just go team by team, but we go in alphabetical order of the city, so we'll start with the Cardinals and end with the Commanders. With the Cardinals, James Conner, he did pick up that injury in this week's game, opening the door a little bit for Trey Benson and DeMercado. But James Conner was able to return to practice. He did have a limited practice at Wednesday due to his finger injury. With him having a limited practice, more than likely he should be good to go this week. But definitely still keep your eye on it. For the most part, though, we're expecting James Conner to play. On to the Falcons. Drake London had to come out of the game on Sunday as well due to a hip pointer injury. He, however, was able to pick up a limited practice on Wednesday, which should be good news. Generally, that means they'll be able to play. Kyle Pitts randomly, though, popped up on the injury report with a hamstring injury. We never want to see hamstring injuries. He did have a limited practice through it, and if you will, kind of put yourself back in the shoes heading into week 1. Kyle Pitts picked up a hamstring injury in that week of practice, but was still able to play in the game. So Kyle Pitts seems to be someone that plays through hamstring injury, so he'll likely be out there, but it might be a less of a workload in the game if he does play. So just monitor Kyle Pitts and Drake London throughout the week. Both of them limited with their injuries, so probably going to be able to play, but they might be less than 100%. So it might be a little bit of a Darnell Mooney week. On to the Ravens. Isaiah Likely has been listed out for tonight's game, as well as Keaton Mitchell. Now, Rasheen Ali is still listed as questionable. So we might actually get some Rasheen Ali action tonight, at least in terms of just being activated to the roster. So keep your eye on him tonight. He won't actually get any meaningful snaps, but we might see him activated to the roster, Rasheen Ali. On to the Buffalo Bills. Amari Cooper, he missed this week's game with a wrist injury. He was listed as a limited participant, so it looks like he's trending towards being able to play. However, Keon Coleman picked up a wrist injury and did not practice. Last week, Amari Cooper was sidelined with a wrist injury. Now it's looking like Keon Coleman will be sidelined with a wrist injury, with Amari Cooper stepping up. Curtis Samuel, another player in the wide receiver room, has a pec injury. He was limited, so he's probably good to go. So just kind of keep your eye on the Amari Cooper situation. With him being limited, it's looking like he'll be able to play. And then with Keon Coleman, his wrist injury, not practicing, looking like he will not be able to play. But keep your eye on that over the next few days. In Carolina, Adam Thielen still is not practicing in return from his hamstring injury. So probably still another week on IR. And that's really it for Carolina. Jonathan Brooks is on the roster now and should still be good. Oh, I'm going to be grouchy for a long time, Rubio. It's just going to be mornings for a little bit. On to the Chicago Bears. Nothing too crazy, so we'll just go ahead and move on here. Most of the nothing, fantasy relevant. On the Bengals, T. Higgins is doubtful for tonight, so we shouldn't get T. Higgins again. Look for more Mike Gesicki. Look for more Jamar Chase. Charlie Jones, also doubtful, but that doesn't mean as much. Really just the big takeaway here, if no T. Higgins, means that we can fire up Mike Gesicki again. On the Browns, no one to really monitor here on the offensive side of the ball. In Dallas, Dak Prescott is already listed as out, and kind of the big story with Dak Prescott is he may end up being shut down for the season. His hamstring injury was pretty severe. His current timetable is 4 to 6 weeks. And that's best case, right? And with the season already being lost, more than likely for the Cowboys at that point, more than likely we could see his season shut down, which does not mean good news for the Cowboys at all. On that note, CeeDee Lamb actually was able to practice in a limited capacity with his shoulder injury. So CeeDee Lamb may actually not miss some time. Definitely monitor that. I mean, I would think if I'm CeeDee Lamb and there's no Dak Prescott, I would at least sit out this week. But keep your eye on that. For sure. It's looking like with a limited practice, CeeDee Lamb should be good. And Brandon Cooks still not returning. Brandon Cooks still not practicing in return from his knee injury, still on IR. So the big story there is just to keep your eye on CeeDee Lamb. No one too crazy on the Broncos. On the Lions, nothing too crazy to monitor either. Marshawn Lloyd on the Packers. The GM has said that he will be ready to come off IR in the near future. Still no update in terms of practice, but Marshawn Lloyd looking to come off IR soon. So definitely pick him up in anticipation of that. And that's really it on that team. On the Texans, Nico Collins didn't practice Wednesday, but there have been reports out there that Nico Collins it should be good to go this week. From kind of what we're hearing is that he would have been good to go last week. So definitely keep your eye on it. While he didn't practice on Wednesday, they might just be cautious in his return from his hamstring injury. He is eligible to return this week. So keep your eye on Nico. He might actually be out there this week. And in the running back room, Dameon Pierce isn't practicing. So it looks like it'll just kind of be another full go Dameon Pierce game. But definitely monitor Nico. That's kind of the big one there. Michael Pittman on the Colts, he isn't practicing with his back and finger injury, but this has kind of been the case all season at this point. So nothing really to be concerned about in terms of Michael Pittman, but definitely still at least monitor it. On the Jaguars, Gabe Davis limited, so he should be able to return this week. And then we have limited practices for Brian Thomas Jr., Tank Bigsby, and Travis Etienne. However, they were able to play last week. So it's probably fine for them, just kind of being cautious. Brian Thomas Jr., Tank Bigsby, Travis Etienne should be good to go. Gabe Davis, who missed this week, should also be good to go in terms of returning. And then Trevor Lawrence has a limited practice as well, but that's just a QB thing. He should be fine. Really nothing to worry about at all, really, on Jacksonville. Oh, shout out Louie. Another super chat. We're killing it this morning. Thank you guys for all the support. No question, just a nice little super chat. Thank you, Louie. On to the Kansas City Chiefs. Kareem Hunt limited with a quad injury, so probably fine. But definitely something to monitor. Mecole Hardman had to come out of the game on Monday, was limited this week, though, so probably good to go in terms of Wednesday's practice. And then Juju still not practicing at all. Still nothing in terms of Juju. And then Isaiah Pacheco is still on track to return, but still going to be out at least a couple more weeks. On the Raiders, Michael Mayer didn't get traded. I'm kind of sad about that, but he is getting close to return, they say. We'll see. I'm not expecting much. Onto the Chargers, Gus Edwards, in his return from the IR, did pick up a limited practice, so that's something to monitor. We might see Gus Edwards before we see Kamani Vidal breakout, which is unfortunate, but good for Gus Edwards. If he was dropped in any leagues, it might be worth picking him back up, but probably not. Either way, looking like we might get a Gus Edwards return soon. On the Rams, no practice updates. They might be Monday Night Football. Let me see. Yeah, they're Monday Night Football, so nothing on the Rams, but just monitor Jordan Whittington. They are playing the Dolphins on Monday Night Football, so no updates there, but everything looks fine. No offensive players to monitor on Minnesota. On the Patriots, same thing, no offensive players to monitor. Things look good over there. In New Orleans, Chris Olave is officially doubtful. And they are debating IR or not. He is meeting with specialists. But so Chris Olave, he had, another concussion. Things are not looking good for him. Doubtful this week, and they are debating whether or not to throw him on IR. So monitor him for sure. Jamal Williams was limited, so he should be good to return this week in terms of backing up Alvin Kamara. But nothing too crazy in terms of the Saints, really. At least in terms, we already knew things were collapsing anyway, right? Like it's just going to be Alvin Kamara, Taysom Hill, and I guess Derek Carr. Giants. Theo Johnson, limited due to knee and back injuries, but probably fine. He's a dog. Graham Gano did practice, so he may be returning actually in terms of his hamstring injury. And Darius Slayton, still not practicing from his concussion, so that's not good news in terms of Darius Slayton's return. But monitor Theo Johnson this week and maybe Graham Gano if you're in need of a kicker. On the Jets, no one to be concerned about. On the Eagles, though, Devontae Smith was held out of practice, and A.J. Brown was limited with his knee injury at Wednesday's walkthrough. So monitor A.J. Brown and Devontae Smith this week. They're probably fine. But definitely something to keep our eye on with them, kind of being banged up all year. Nothing new to worry about in Pittsburgh. In San Francisco, Christian McCaffrey's practice window was open, so look for him to be returned sooner rather than later. Things supposedly say Kyle Shanahan has come out and said that the running back has exhibited no pain in his return. So things should be pretty good for Christian McCaffrey. That's why we recommend trying to buy him while you still can. Juwan Jennings picked up a limited practice, so he should be good to go this week in terms of his return. And Deebo Samuel, also limited, so hopefully he's able to play this week. Jordan Mason taken off the practice report, injury report. So Jordan Mason should be good in terms of his health as well. And Jake Moody, limited practice. So we might actually see Jake Moody return to the team as well. But things are looking good in terms of Christian McCaffrey returning, Deebo, Juwan Jennings, and Jake Moody all returning, and Jordan Mason off the practice report. So this is not an Isaac Guerrero week. On the Seahawks, they might be on a bye. Yeah, they're on a bye, I believe. Yeah. Buccaneers. Sterling Shepard not practicing on Wednesday, so keep your eye on that. Jalen McMillan is also not practicing. Baker Mayfield is also not practicing. So that's Jalen McMillan, Sterling Shepard, and Baker Mayfield all not practicing this week. We know Mike Evans is already out as well. Definitely something to monitor. Maybe go ahead and take a Kyle Trask swing. Now, Baker Mayfield generally plays through injury, so he's probably fine, and it's Wednesday, so it's not a big deal, but definitely still something to monitor. I would be more concerned about the wide receivers that were not practicing. If Trey Palmer is out there, I would definitely pick him up because Sterling Shepard and Jalen McMillan are not practicing. Somebody has to catch passes, and I guess it'll be Cade Otton, right? But still, Sterling Shepard, Jalen McMillan, not looking good in terms of their game day status, something to monitor over the week. Baker Mayfield not practicing, but that's probably more of a veteran quarterback thingy. Tyjae Spears on the Titans, limited. So looking like he'll be able to return this week. Tony Pollard also limited, so looking like he'll still be able to continue to play. Will Levis limited with his shoulder injury, but I think at this point we know it's probably Mason Rudolph going forward. So nothing really to be concerned about in Tennessee. It looks like Tyjae Spears should be able to return, which is good news for him. And Tony Pollard looking like he'll still be able to play. And lastly, the Commanders. Brian Robinson on track to return this week. He has a limited practice with his hamstring injury, so things should be good for Brian Robinson. That is all the injury rundowns. Hopefully that is helpful for you guys. Lots of players to keep our eye on over the coming days, but for the most part, things are pretty consistent, and we knew them already. Nothing too crazy this week, but definitely keep your eye on some of those players we mentioned. Before we get into the next segment, our starts and sits, why don't we hear a little bit about, let's do the DFS Dominator. Maybe build a little bit of a lineup.
Hey, I know DFS may have peaked, but there are still hundreds of thousands of people to play and millions of dollars up for grabs every week. So let's put our hoodie on and let's talk about Player Profiler's DFS Dominator. It has a cash game optimizer that leverages the projections from Billy and Theo and Bradley and Evan and that Player Profiler AI engine to create cash game lineups that certainly have a high floor, but also give you that ceiling. Now, you've probably heard about the most powerful tool of all, our Lineup Genius. We know winning GPPs requires a completely different approach, which is why our Lineup Genius takes you through the process of selecting the quarterbacks in the juiciest matchups. Then it highlights the stacks and runbacks that are available, lets you pick the chalk level, lets you pick the level of correlation with a number of other proprietary settings available to you. Click a button and it generates hundreds of lineups to be imported into FanDuel and DraftKings. And it's just $45 a year, not a week, a year. So for that reason alone, if you play DFS, you'd be an idiot not to buy the DFS Dominator.
That DFS Dominator is incredible. Genuinely. Have built a ton of winning lineups with that thing. Definitely recommend it. It comes included in the all-in package, but you can get the DFS Dominator by its lonesome as well. Cannot recommend it enough. And the rest of Player Profiler tools. Go to playerprofiler.com for a bunch of free metrics and stuff, but there's also the all-in package that you can purchase right now as well. We've made it to the start and sit portion of the show. We've got one start and one sit per position, as well as 3 flex plays. We'll start at quarterback, and we'll be going with starting Russell Wilson against the Commanders. The Commanders, they are pretty stingy against the pass, to be honest, in terms of their pass yards. They are number 5 in pass yards allowed, but passing touchdowns is the opposite story. They have allowed the 12th most passing touchdowns throughout the season so far. And I just view a little bit of this being a shootout between the Commanders and Steelers. Vegas is only expecting 45.5 points, but the Commanders are favored by 3, suggesting a little bit of a competitive contest. This defense should give up some big plays to George Pickens and maybe the new acquisition of Mike Williams. I just think that Russell Wilson this week should be pretty solid. We saw in week 7 in his return against the Jets, 264 passing yards, 2 passing touchdowns, and a rushing touchdown. He had a QB3 finish with 24.9 points. Last week, he only had 13 points against the Giants, but it just wasn't a game script conducive to passing success. I think this one will be. The Commanders are playing lights out, and I think that'll put some pressure on Russell Wilson and the Steelers' passing offense. So we're going to be firing up Russell Wilson against the Commanders. The quarterback we will be sitting is Derek Carr. Derek Carr against the Falcons. The Falcons are just a very stingy defense. The secondary in general is very good. And, well, Derek Carr has no weapons. Absolutely no weapons. Chris Olave not playing. It's really just Taysom Hill and Alvin Kamara. And they may be fine, right? They may help him in terms of getting to 10 to 12 points or whatever on the day. But Derek Carr has absolutely no ceiling. Absolutely no ceiling against the Falcons this week. Have absolutely zero expectations for him. Not firing him up at all. I need you to sit Derek Carr against the Falcons with no weapons against that tough defense. There's just no reason for it. You got to move on from Derek Carr this week. At the running back position, we'll be firing up DeAndre Swift. Start DeAndre Swift versus the New England Patriots. The Patriots defense is just bad, especially against the run. They have allowed the 6th most rushing yards and the 12th most rushing touchdowns so far this season. And they find themselves 11th in points allowed in general. The last few weeks, they have allowed huge games to Tank Bigsby and Tony Pollard. And Breece Hall had 89 yards against him, but Braylon Allen was able to get to touchdown. Basically, what I'm saying is running backs succeed against this Patriots defense. Tank Bigsby had over 100 yards. Tony Pollard had over 100 yards. Breece Hall almost had 100 yards, but his backup had 30 yards and a touchdown. So either way, the running backs get a lot of points against this Patriots defense. DeAndre Swift should have another huge week against them, continuing his success. 29, 20, 21, 19, 14 points. Literally hasn't scored less than 14 points over the last 5 weeks. He keeps it going against the Patriots with another big game. The running back we'll be sitting is Jordan Mason. Jordan Mason going up against the Buccaneers is just a tough matchup. He is banged up as well. He is looking like he'll be able to return from a shoulder injury, but that has been sidelining him the past few weeks. 2 out of the last 3 weeks, he's had to leave the game in the middle of it. But even then, he just hasn't found much success. Over the last 4 weeks, he hasn't scored more, and he hasn't even scored 10 points, 8 points, 9 points, 8 points, 1 point. Just has not been that good. And the Buccaneers are actually pretty stingy against the run. They find themselves in the top half of the league in rushing touchdowns allowed and rushing attempts allowed. So it should be pretty tough sledding for Jordan Mason. Isaac Orendo starting to break out a little bit as well. Deebo Samuel should be back. Juwan Jennings should be back. And the Buccaneers, with them not being that good, should just kind of end up not having a lot of weapons right now. It should just be a slow game in general. Not expecting a lot of points to be scored. And I'm not really going to rely on a banged up Jordan Mason against an above average rush defense. So we're going to be sitting Jordan Mason against the Buccaneers. At the wide receiver position, we're going to be starting Brian Thomas Jr. against the Minnesota Vikings. Last week, he played through injury, and so it's making people, just kind of discuss if they should fire him up again this week with him being less than 100%. And the answer is yes, you should fire him up. He was still able to get 4 targets and 6 points last week against the Eagles. And this week, he goes up against the Vikings, which have allowed the most pass attempts, the 4th most passing yards, and the 6th most passing touchdowns this season. They're very, very good against the run, so the Jaguars are going to have to pass, and that's how it's going to go. Brian Thomas should have a pretty big week against this team. They are getting shredded by wide receivers, and Brian Thomas Jr. has a good matchup and is starting to get healthier. So we're firing him up this week against the Vikings in a game script that should benefit the receiving game. And the wide receiver we're sitting, and I hate to say this, but it's Jamison Williams against the Houston Texans. Jamison Williams, I think in his first game back from suspension is going to be in the doghouse a little bit. I'm not expecting Dan Campbell to really scheme up a lot of plays for him in his return. Now, he might play angry, which could, help him in terms of making a breakaway play or something like that. But we already saw his target totals go down. From 9 and 11 the first 2 weeks, he only had 3, 2, 4, and 1 targets prior to his suspension. And that's just not enough for me, especially going up against the Texans who, they're allowing a lot of passing touchdowns. In fact, they've allowed the 2nd most passing touchdowns. They're actually third in passing yards allowed. They've allowed the 29th most passing yards. So they're not allowing a lot of big plays. They're just kind of getting shredded in the red zone in terms of passing touchdowns. But in terms of these big chunk plays that Jameson Williams succeeds at, the Texans are pretty stingy against it. And I would assume that he's going to be in a little bit of a doghouse this situation this week coming out of suspension. So I don't really want to rely on him. I'm going to be sitting Jameson Williams this week against the Texans. At tight end, we're going to be firing up Jake Ferguson against the Eagles. Now, I did think that CeeDee Lamb was going to be out this week. It's looking like he'll be able to play. But even then, he's going to be banged up. And in a divisional game against the Eagles, I think that they will have to rely on Jake Ferguson. I think they will, especially with banged up CeeDee Lamb, no Brandon Cooks, Jalen Tolbert. I think Jake Ferguson is gearing up for a decent game against the Eagles. Now, the Eagles are good against tight ends. They've only allowed the 5th most receiving yards to the position so far. But part of that is because they have had the bye week. So we'll see. We'll see. I think this is more of a team-dependent thing where, things are just kind of lining up for them having to rely on Jake Ferguson. But still, it is a game script that should help him as well. It's always hard to find the tight ends to start and sit. This is always the toughest portion of the show. But still, I like Jake Ferguson this week, even if a decently tough matchup. I think the injuries that have piled up on his team kind of help him. And the tight end will be sitting is Sam Laporta against the Texans. He just has not been able to do anything. Jameson Williams is now back, and the Texans are actually the best against tight end. They've only allowed 181 yards to the tight end position so far, and they haven't had their bye week. They have allowed the least receiving yards to the tight end position by a lot. By a lot. The next best team is the Lions, who have allowed 63 more receiving yards to the tight ends, despite playing one less game. So seriously, the Texans are really, really good against tight ends. Not a good week to play Sam Laporta. On top of the disappointment he's had all season, we're going to be sitting him this week against the Texans. And lastly, our 3 flex plays. These are actually tough to come up with this week, just injuries and weird games in general. There's not a lot of decently confident flex plays out there. But Tyrone Tracy and Chuba Hubbard, for that matter, both of the running backs in the Panthers-Giants games, I think are going to be decent flex plays this week. Tyrone Tracy killing it. Chuba Hubbard killing it. Soft defenses in games where quarterbacks are really trying to prove themselves. I want to fire up Tracy and Hubbard this week. And J.K. Dobbins against the Titans. Should be a fun game for the Chargers. Titans defense getting kind of gashed by the run. J.K. Dobbins getting a ton of volume recently. I think that this could be a J.K. Dobbins week against the Titans, believe it or not. And yeah, that is the flex plays. Now let's go ahead and do a little bit of a game pick situation. We're going to go game by game here and just give our picks, nothing too crazy, maybe a little bit of expectations of what we'll see, and then we'll answer some of your questions in the chat. Thank you guys so much for tuning in as always. Let's get this going. So tonight's Thursday Night Football game, we have the Ravens hosting the Cincinnati Bengals, favored by 6.5. I'm going to be crazy here and say the Bengals do cover. I think that this being a divisional game and primetime, Joe Burrow and Jamar Chase show up in a big way even. But the Ravens still probably end up closing this game out. Curious to see if Derrick Henry can keep it going. And really, really hoping for a big Jamar Chase game. We need it. We need it. Moving on, we have the Giants heading to Carolina. They're favored by 6, but call me crazy. I think the Panthers actually win this game. Bryce Young finally got the victory formation last week, which was huge for his confidence. And this is a team that the Panthers should be able to beat. If they can beat the Saints, they can beat the Giants. Should be a fun garbage game. This is one of those games I like where there's just 2 bad teams that it's actually kind of fun to watch, at least in terms of the offense. So I think that this will be a more fun game than people are giving credit for. I think actually I'm going to go with the Panthers here, especially to cover 6. There's no way the Giants win by 6. That's a huge spread. Chicago hosting the Patriots, favored by 6. I think the Patriots can cover. In fact, I think the Patriots can win. Drake May is just playing really, really well. And I always love these situations where there's a little bit more on the table. Rookie quarterback versus rookie quarterback. That's got to fire Drake May up. And really the rest of the team should be a fun one. Chicago should, on the offensive side of the ball, bounce back a decent bit against this Patriots team. But I just think that Drake May should be able to cover that 6 points, put the team on his back a little bit. Should be a fun one to watch. Yeah, I mean, I like the Bears offense to get back on track this week, but 6 points is a big spread. We'll go with the Patriots to at least cover, and I honestly wouldn't be surprised if they win this one. Bills heading to Indianapolis, favored by 4. We'll give it to them. Josh Allen just playing too well. The Bills just playing too well. And honestly, Joe Flacco looked terrible last week, and I don't think he's going to get back on track, actually. I really think that it's kind of over for the Joe Flacco fun. But we'll see. Either way, Buffalo should win this one pretty handily. Chiefs hosting the Broncos, favored by 8.5. That's just way too big of a spread. The Chiefs are in close game after close game after close game. So there's just no way they win by 8.5. That's crazy talk. But they should still win. They should keep the undefeated streak going. But look for Bo Nix to keep it going. Look for a fun game from him. I could see Cortland Sutton getting shut down again, so look for maybe a Troy Franklin bounce-back game. I'm curious to see the D-Hop Xavier Worthy split against a decent defense. But either way, 8.5, too big of a spread for the way the Chiefs are playing right now. Should be able to cover the Broncos. Falcons heading to New Orleans, favored by 3.5. And I think they cover that. This Saints team is just in bad shape right now. And the Falcons playing unbelievably well right now. Keeping it going with the Falcons. Think they win this one. Continue their undefeated streak in the South. San Francisco heading to Tampa Bay, favored by 5.5. And I think that the Buccaneers should be able to cover. The 49ers should win this game. I think the Buccaneers are just a little too injured right now. But still, 5.5 I think is a big spread. We just saw the Buccaneers go toe-to-toe with the Chiefs. I'm not sure why they wouldn't be able to do it against a worse 49ers team. So that's a big spread. I think the Buccaneers cover, but should be a competitive game. I do think the 49ers end up winning it. I think the Buccaneers are just a little too unhealthy right now to win it, but I think they can cover. Washington hosting the Steelers, favored by 3, and I'll give it to them. Actually, you know what? No. I'm going with the Steelers win. Shout out Dustin. I think the Steelers win this one. I'm very curious to see how Jaden Daniels handles TJ Watt. I think that this will really come down to that. And I think that the Steelers defense should be able to make some noise as they usually do. I think this is going to be a tougher matchup for the Commanders than the Vegas point total and the spread suggests. I'm going to go ahead and go with a Steelers upset here. Should be a fun one. I do think there'll be some points on the board, but I think that TJ Watt is going to end up making a little bit of noise in this game, making it hard on Jaden Daniels. Vikings heading to Jacksonville, favored by 4. And I'm going to go with another upset here. I think the Jaguars win this game. I think the Minnesota Vikings are playing a little bit less well right now. They're kind of losing some steam. And I think the Jaguars, this is a weird one to me. This is a gut feeling game. I know the Jaguars are also not playing well, but this just feels like one they win to me. I think Brian Thomas Jr. has a pretty big game. And I'm expecting Trevor Lawrence to get back on track against a soft Vikings defense. Now, we've got the Chargers hosting the Titans, favored by 7.5. I don't know. I think the Titans can cover that. That's a huge spread. I think the Chargers win, but 7.5 is kind of big. I'm not going to lie. That's a little big for me in this game. Even with the Titans being as bad as they are, it's not like the Chargers are that good either. So that's a big spread to me. I'm not a big fan of that. I think they'll cover it. Look for Tony Pollard to keep things going. And as you guys saw, I did think that J.K. Dobbins is a fun little flex play this week. The big storyline to watch is if Justin Herbert keeps it going. He finally has some 20-pointers in back-to-back weeks. Hopefully he can keep it going. Eagles heading to Dallas, favored by 7.5. And yeah, I mean, the Cowboys just have nothing going for them right now. Actually, at home, they can cover. We've seen Cooper Rush do this before. Let's not get too ahead of ourselves. If CeeDee Lamb's going to tough it out and play, there's enough going on in Dallas to keep this game interesting, especially at home. Cooper Rush has kind of done this before, played a lot better than we expected him to. You know what? We'll go with the Dallas Cowboys covering this game. The Eagles definitely still win it. Should be fun. But 7.5, I think is a bit too big. I think that's a little bit too much of a fade on Cooper Rush. Cardinals hosting the Jets, favored by 1. We'll give it to them. We'll give it to them for sure. I know the Jets just kind of got back on track, but that's just a classic primetime Aaron Rodgers moment. Heading to Arizona, I think it's going to be a little bit tougher. I am curious how Marvin Harrison Jr. does against Sauce Gardner. That's going to be the matchup to watch this week. But either way, I think the Cardinals can win it. Kyler Murray playing decently well. The Jets getting back on track, but I just still don't believe in them in terms of a playoff team, a playoff hopeful team. Lions heading to Houston, favored by 3.5. And yeah, we'll give it to them, especially J-Mo back. Not expecting a big JMO game, but still, I think that just helps the offense as a whole. And yeah, Houston just not playing well right now. They are tumbling. So we'll go with the Lions. And then Rams hosting the Dolphins, favored by 2.5. We'll give it to the Dolphins. I think the Dolphins can win this game. I know they're heading to LA, but Tua back, I think, just helps this team as a whole. We're going to give it to them. And that should do it. There's our game picks, our starts and sits, all that fun stuff. I'll go ahead and hop into the chat now and answer some questions as a thank you for tuning in. Tomorrow we'll have a guest, so make sure you tune in. We've got Evan Ringler coming on. All right. You got an interesting offer for Bo Nix in a Superflex Dynasty League. You're offered a first, second, and third. I would decline that. Keep Bo Nix. You're offered Tillman and Najee for Metcalf. I would hold on to Metcalf, I think. It's not bad. It's not a bad offer at all. Those are good 2-for-1s. But I would hold on to Metcalf for now. I'd like to have the better player in the deal. But, I don't know. Tillman is looking really good. Najee is pretty consistent. So if you would rather go for the depth, that's not a bad move. JSN's starting to break out as well. I don't mind trying to sell Metcalf. I just think maybe ask for like a third on top of this. That would seal it for me. It's a little too close to where I would right now want Metcalf, but I think that is a good offer. Josh Allen is breaking wrists. Gesicki or Ertzy this week? Gesicki. Seems he's a must start without T. Higgins. Any chance Higbee is back this week? I don't think so, but it is definitely possible. Keenan Allen or Deontay Johnson? Keenan Allen. Would you trade A-Chan and Devontae Smith for Lamb and Pollard? Yeah. Yeah, I think so. Yeah, I think so. It's looking like CeeDee Lamb is actually fine. And to go from Devontae Smith to CeeDee Lamb is huge. And, oh, God. I don't know, actually. That one's too close to call. So I'm thinking about it now. A-Chan to Pollard is a little bit too much of it. I don't know. Getting CeeDee Lamb is pretty huge. The jump from Devontae Smith to CeeDee Lamb is smaller than the drop from A-Chan to Pollard. I'm going to go with, I think I would still take A-Chan and Smith, actually. I'm going to go A-Chan and Smith right now. He's killing it right now. Do we drop Mason? I would say no. J-Mo did do nothing wrong. Kind of annoying. Is it risky to play Ingram if I also have BTJ? No, fire them both up. Would you start Waddle or Juwan Jennings? Waddle. Waddle. Right. And I think that's it. Oh, wait. Taysom Hill or Gesicki. And then Tyreek Hill or Tracy. Probably Taysom and Tyreek. But I don't know. Gesicki's kind of a must start, it looks like, with what's his face? Although Ravens are a little bit better against tight ends. Either way, I would still go Tyreek Hill over Tracy. I'm never going to sit Tyreek Hill. I just don't think you can. In terms of the Hill versus Gesicki, Taysom Hill just looks like the whole Saints offense right now. So I think he's got a higher floor and probably ceiling. So I think you've got to lean there. Odunze or Bucky? Ryan, it's looking like there's if Sterling Shepard and McMillan are out for Tampa, then I would go Bucky. If not, Odunze should have a pretty big week against New England. And then Hubbard or Puka. Probably Puka, but Hubbard is a decent start as well. But Puka at full PPR seems like an easy one. But that should do it. Thank you all so much for tuning in. As always, make sure you hit that like button and make sure you subscribe. We will be back tomorrow with a special guest. We'll have Evan Ringler joining the show, talking some of our projections, reactions to the trades that have been happening across the league, as well as just getting his takes from the season as a whole. So it's going to be a fun show, as always, when we have guests. So make sure you're ready for that tomorrow at 10 a.m. Eastern. Hit that like button. Hit that like button. Hit that subscribe. Have a terrific Thursday and a wonderful rest of your week. Peace.
Hey, I want to thank you for being part of this broadcast. If you have any thoughts on it, leave a comment. If you enjoyed it, make sure you leave a like. And if you want to see more shows on the Player Profiler channel, subscribe to it. That's how we know You want more.